My daughter-in-law called me Waitress at her birthday party, so I grabbed the mic and ruined her in front of everyone. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in April. The sun was warm, the house smelled of catered food and expensive candles, and everything was decorated in shades of blush and gold like a wedding magazine ad. It was Meredith's 40th birthday. She had rented out a country club lounge, complete with a live band and a private bartender, and I was invited not as a guest, but clearly as an extra. An afterthought. I showed up with a simple gift in hand. A framed photo of my grandson when he was 4, sitting on my lap in the old kitchen, before Meredith started pushing me out of the family frame. I didn't expect a red carpet, but I also didn't expect what she did to me that day. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. I stood near the back patio, watching the guests flow in and out, sipping wine and complimenting each other's dresses. Everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog. I wasn't wearing pearls or designer heels. I wore slacks and a floral blouse. Nice enough, I thought, for a birthday party that was supposed to be casual and intimate, as my son David had told me. He'd lied. This was not intimate. This was staged. Meredith never looked directly at me the entire time. At some point, the food arrived, buffet style. A caterer whispered to her that one of the servers was missing. Meredith looked around, rolled. Her eyes, then her gaze landed on me. "Oh," she said loudly, as if it were a funny joke. "I guess Helen can help pass out the appetizers. She's already dressed like staff." There was a moment of stunned silence. Someone chuckled. Someone else quickly looked away. And me, I froze. I didn't say a word. I didn't laugh. I just stood there holding the photo frame with trembling hands while Meredith's friends looked at me with poorly concealed pity. David said nothing. He didn't even flinch. That hurt more than the insult. He was once the boy who cried when I left him at kindergarten, who used to sleep on my chest when he was sick, and now he just stood there, looking down at his champagne glass, pretending not to hear. I made my way to the restroom without looking at anyone. I locked the stall door and stared at myself in the mirror above the sink for several long minutes. My lips were pressed tight. My chest hurt. And behind my eyes, a fire started to burn. She called me Waitress, at her party, in front of my own son. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But no. Something else kicked in, something I hadn't felt in years. I wiped my hands, walked back out, and quietly waited by the corner, far from the table, far from her. I sat and watched people toast her, clap for her, pose for photos with her. I watched David put his arm around her shoulder and smile. I watched my grandson bring her a balloon shaped like a heart, and I thought, I have no place here. Later that night, when the guests had left and the cleanup crew was tossing paper flowers and scraping plates, I stood at the edge of the room. I was about to say goodbye to my grandson, who was falling asleep on a lounge chair, when Meredith walked up behind me with a forced smile. "Thanks for coming, Helen," she said flatly. "Next time we'll give you a uniform." I didn't answer her. I looked her right in the eyes and turned around without saying anything. The next morning, I woke up feeling like someone had knocked all the air out of my chest. I opened the refrigerator, stared at the coffee machine, and didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there. I didn't go to work that day, my part-time shift at the library. I didn't answer the phone when my friend Joanna called. I didn't water the plants or open the windows. I just sat in my recliner and let the weight of everything settle in. I had spent years caring for that boy, David, alone. My husband passed when David was 10. I worked 2 jobs for a decade. I missed birthdays and holidays because I was working night shifts at the diner just to pay his tuition. And when he married Meredith, I thought I had done my part. I thought I could finally be included in something that looked like peace. But from day one, Meredith made it clear I was not welcome. At first, pitching ourselves to anyone who'd listen. "I'd like you there," he said. "As a founder." I didn't answer right away, but I went. That meeting, in a modest community room with coffee-stained carpet and folding chairs, felt more honest. than anything I'd seen come out of that company in the last 5 years. No brand consultants, no photographers, just blueprints, notebooks, and people actually trying to build something useful. I stayed quiet most of the meeting. At the end, one of the architects, young, polite, mid-30s, shook my hand and said, "I've heard about you. You're the one who made this company what it is." I nodded. "Not what it is," I said. "What it used to be." David looked over but didn't say anything. He just nodded, like he finally understood. Weeks passed. Summer turned to early fall. My grandson started 3rd grade. David started asking more questions about old clients, old contracts, and how my husband used to handle projects. It wasn't transactional. He was listening, but Meredith never reached out again. No apology, no thank you, no recognition. And at some point I realized I didn't need it. I wasn't waiting anymore. I had already taken back what mattered. My name, my voice, my space. Meredith could rewrite the past however she wanted. But the future? That belonged to me. By the time Thanksgiving came around, Meredith was gone. Not just from the company, gone. She had moved out of the house she shared with David. According to my grandson, she said it was just for a little while, but the silence said otherwise. Her clothes were gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway anymore. The backyard garden she once obsessively posted about on Instagram had withered into brown stalks and dry soil. David didn't say much. He only told me once, while we were sitting in the garage sorting through boxes of old project files. She said she needed time to think, he said, pulling out a dusty folder. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't ask questions. I just handed him the next folder. Later that day, he came into the kitchen while I was making tea. "Mom," she said, "I chose you over her." I turned and looked at him. "You didn't choose me," I said. "You chose what was right." He didn't reply. He just nodded and poured himself a glass of water like a man who'd finally stopped trying to convince everyone he was fine. That Thanksgiving, for the first time in years, the dinner was at my house. David brought the turkey. My grandson brought hand-drawn placemats. I made the stuffing and mashed potatoes from scratch, just like my husband used to like. The kitchen was loud with small sounds, clinking silverware, bubbling gravy, the scrape of chairs being pulled from the table. At one point, my grandson turned to me and said, "Grandma, is this your house?" I smiled. It always was. And ours nodded like that made perfect sense. We ate. We cleaned up. We sat on the porch afterward with blankets over our legs while the wind picked up in the trees. There was no toast, no big speech, but there was something better than that, peace. A week later, I got a letter from the county business registrar, the official paperwork finalizing the removal of Meredith Interiors as an active entity under the Keller Builders umbrella. The branding rights had been dissolved, all claims withdrawn. The folder sat on my kitchen counter for a full day before I opened it. Once I did, I closed it just as fast. I didn't need to read it. I knew what it said. I had it in writing. And more than that, I had it in proof. Every time David came to me for advice, every time he showed up unannounced just to talk about how to rebuild what he'd nearly let fall apart, that was more than paper. That was change. Meredith never came back. She didn't fight in court. She didn't post online. She faded out like a person trying to rewrite her own story somewhere else. I never heard from her again, and I never sought her out. There were no final words, and I didn't need them. Because the truth is, sometimes closure isn't a conversation. Sometimes it's watching someone lose the thing they tried to take from you without saying a word. By spring, David had rebuilt Keller Builders into something different. He brought in 2 new project managers. He renamed the office conference room after my husband. They hung a framed photo of the original build team on the back wall, the same photo I used to keep in a drawer because Meredith once said it looked too outdated for the company image. And one day, when I walked into the office just to drop off a contract draft, I saw something new by the front desk, a small plaque, mounted in bronze. Helen Keller, co-founder, 1982, no announcement. No ceremony, just there, permanent. I stood in front of it for a long minute before heading back outside. Later, David texted me, "Hope that's okay. We should have done it a long time ago, I replied. It's not about being late. It's about finally getting it right. In April, I took a short trip, just 3 days. I went to the lakeside cabin where my husband and I used to spend weekends before the business grew too busy. It had been sitting untouched for years, practically abandoned. I had the locks changed, cleaned out the broken furniture, and opened every window to let the dust out. I didn't go there to remember anything. I went there to start something. That summer, I started hosting small retreats there. 1 weekend a month. For women around my age, widows, retirees, a few old friends, even a couple of former employees. No therapy, no speeches, just space to talk, laugh, share what we'd been through. I didn't advertise it. I didn't name it anything. I just called people and said, "Come," and they came. Some of them had stories worse than mine. Families who took everything, kids who stopped calling, husbands who left them bankrupt and alone. Some just needed a quiet place to be themselves again, but the truth underneath all of them was the same. Being erased isn't always loud. Sometimes it's slow, silent, polite, and devastating, but we were still here, and we weren't going quietly anymore. One night, sitting by the fireplace with a group of women, someone asked, "What did it feel like that day you stood up at the party and took the mic?" I thought about it. Then I said, "It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like getting my seat back at my own table." That night, when I went to bed, I slept without waking once. I used to think the worst part of what Meredith did was the public humiliation. That moment when she said waitress like it was a punchline. But it wasn't. The worst part was that she tried to take what I had built, convinced herself she was entitled to it, and expected me to stay quiet while she did. And I almost did. Almost swallowed it, like I'd done so many times before. But not this time. This time, I opened my mouth, not to scream, not to beg, just to speak, and it was enough. I never raised my voice, but I took everything back anyway. She deactivated her social media accounts. And according to Joanna, who still had a cousin working at the country club, Meredith had canceled her plans for a summer fundraiser she was co-hosting. She went quiet. David, however, started showing up again. He called. Stopped by once. He even brought my grandson over on a Saturday afternoon, saying they were in the neighborhood, even though I knew perfectly well it was out of their way. I didn't push. I didn't bring up Meredith. I didn't ask questions. I just spent time with my grandson. We built a puzzle together at the kitchen table and shared peanut butter sandwiches while David scrolled through his phone like someone trying to avoid eye contact with the past. When they were leaving, David lingered at the door. "I should have said something earlier," he muttered. I nodded. "You still can." I let it get too far. I let her handle everything because it was easier. "No one forced you." He nodded again, eyes low. "I know. I just thought you didn't care." "I cared too much," I said. That was the problem. He didn't say anything after that. Just turned and left. A few days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It had no return address, just my name printed in sharp handwriting across the envelope. I opened it slowly. Inside there was one page, typed. It wasn't an apology. It was a list. A list of every expense Meredith had used company money for. Flowers for her launch, photography sessions, a branding consultant, spa days disguised as client engagement, a catered brunch for influencers, custom tote bags with her initials. Every line had a dollar amount next to it, and every line had been highlighted. At the bottom of the page, there was one sentence, underlined. "Tell me if I missed anything." That was it. No sincerely, no thank you, no signature. "TUO" was from her. I didn't need confirmation. That letter wasn't a peace offering. It was her way of saying, "Fine, you won." But I hadn't won anything. I'd just stopped losing. The silence stretched on for a few more weeks. Then, one afternoon in July, I ran into Meredith by accident. It was at the pharmacy, of all places. I was picking up my prescriptions. She was coming out of the cosmetics aisle with a basket full of overpriced face creams. We both froze. She looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. No makeup, no designer bag, hair pulled back roughly. Not the usual version of her. She saw me and started to turn around, but I didn't move. I stepped forward. She stopped. "Meredith," I said, calm. "We can keep pretending. Or we can settle this now." She shifted the basket to her other hand and stared at me like I was some stranger from a life she was trying to delete. "I'm not interested in a scene," she said, quiet, but sharp. "There's no scene," I said. "I just want to hear it from you." "Hear what?" "That you knew what you were doing. That it wasn't a mistake. That you made a choice." She looked away, then back at me. "I wanted a name," she finally said. "Something that was mine. And you thought stealing mine would help?" "You had it all already," she snapped. "Respect, history, the family. Everyone talked about how strong you were, how David looked up to you. I just wanted a piece of that. But it was never enough, was it? You just had to take it back." "No," I said. "You never had it to begin with. That's the difference." Stared at each other. Then she said something that stayed with me for days. "You always made me feel like a guest." That hit harder than I expected. "Meredith," I said slowly, "you were a guest. That's what marrying into a family is. You're invited in. You're welcomed. But that doesn't give you the right to change the locks." She didn't respond. She just left the basket on the shelf and walked out of the store. That was the last time I saw her in public. After that, things began to change. David came by more often, not to ask for money or favors, just to sit on the porch and talk. Sometimes he brought my grandson. Sometimes he came alone. He told me he was trying to rebuild the business properly. Slowly. Quietly. One evening, he asked if I wanted to attend a project meeting. They're rebuilding the Thompson School wing. We're leading the contract. "You were the one who got us our first education project, remember?" I remembered. It was back when my husband and I used to split our days between job sites and town meetings. Exactly. You have leverage. You used it. Now she wants to pretend it was a misunderstanding. I waited a few days before responding. When I did, I was brief. "I will attend a meeting only if it includes full financial disclosures from the last 2 years, including any allocations to Meredith Interiors. This is not a personal matter. This is business. Let me know when the documents are prepared. No signature. No best regards. Just the facts." The following week, I arrived at the Keller Builders office again. This time, they didn't make me wait in the lobby. The receptionist stood as I entered and offered me coffee. Meredith was already inside the conference room, sitting straight-backed in a navy pantsuit. David sat beside her. He looked tired. I didn't say hello. I placed my folder on the table and sat down. A man named Patrick, one of the external advisors, started the meeting. "We're here today to find a resolution between the parties regarding concerns raised at the shareholder meeting and recent public statements." I cut him off. "There's no confusion. Meredith launched a brand using company funds, company, staff, and my late husband's name. I asked for clarity. I was ignored. I asked for transparency. I was dismissed. Now I want documentation." Meredith sat perfectly still. She was trying to look calm, but her fingers were white around her pen. Patrick nodded awkwardly and handed out a packet of documents. "These are the expenses related to the Meredith Interiors initiative." I flipped through it slowly. There it was. Company credit cards, paid invoices, vendor checks, even a promotional photo shoot billed under marketing and outreach. "Are you aware," I said aloud, "that these charges were not authorized by a board vote?" David opened his mouth, but Meredith cut in first. "They were part of our brand expansion strategy. It's common practice." "You don't get to use our money for your strategy," I said. "I'm part of this family," she snapped. I didn't raise my voice. "So am I replied. David finally spoke. "What do you want, Mom? You want to shut her down?" want the name Keller taken off anything she controls. I want all expenses repaid, and I want a formal statement confirming that Meredith Interiors is not affiliated with the Keller Builders organization in any way. Patrick looked stunned. That's quite a demand. No, I said. It's quite fair. Meredith turned to David, her voice sharp. You're just going to sit there and let her do this? He rubbed his face, exhaled hard, then said something I hadn't heard from him in years. She's right. Meredith froze. What? She's right, he said again, this time softer. We shouldn't have done it like this. We didn't ask. We didn't even tell her. Meredith looked like he'd just hit her. You're siding with her? No. I'm taking responsibility. She stood, gathered her papers, and walked out without another word. The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then Patrick asked, So what now? David looked at me. You still want to press formal action? No, I said. Not if the statement is made and the money returned. He nodded. I'll make it happen. The meeting ended. I walked out, past Meredith in the hallway, still, fuming, pretending to scroll through her phone, and went straight to the elevator. Outside, the sun was bright. I stood for a second before getting in my car. I didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't a victory dance. It was something else, heavier. This was the cost of finally being heard. I drove home in silence. No music, no calls. That night, I got a message from David. Not an email, a text. The statement's being drafted. She's not happy, but it's done. Thank you, Mom, for everything. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and stared out the window. For once, everything was quiet, and I wasn't the one who had to keep the peace. 3 weeks passed after the mediation. The formal statement was sent out to Keller Builders partners and employees, clearly separating the company from Meredith Interiors. A public relations memo followed, stripping Meredith's name from any shared branding and correcting previous claims. The expenses were repaid through a check issued from David's personal account, but no apology came. Not from Meredith. Not even a fake one. Instead, she disappeared. She didn't return to the Keller Builders office. I said, I'm here to tell the truth, because for the past 5 years, I've watched myself be slowly erased from this family. I've watched holidays happen without me, events pass without a call. I've watched a woman who married into this family take every piece of history I built with my husband and make it her own. Meredith's face turned red. I've been called names, laughed at, dismissed. I've been told I don't belong in the very company I helped create. And at your birthday party, Meredith, you looked at me, your son's grandmother, and called me Waitress. The room went still. No one made a sound. I stayed quiet, I said, but not because I was weak, because I was deciding. And now I've made my decision. I held up the black folder. This is a formal motion to initiate a shareholder review of Keller Builders and all affiliated properties, including Meredith Interiors, effective immediately. Signed, witnessed, and filed. I walked forward and set the folder down on the table in front of them. I won't raise my voice. I won't beg to be seen. I'll just remind everyone here that names matter. So do signatures. So does the truth. And the truth is, without me, none of this exists. Not the company, not the name, not even this party. So no, I won't be erased. Not by anyone. Then I handed the microphone back to the coordinator and walked out. No one stopped me. I passed Meredith's parents on the way out. Her mother stared at me like she didn't know what planet I came from. Her father looked down and sipped his drink. Joanna was waiting for me outside, in the passenger seat of my car, like we'd planned. She didn't say anything until I buckled. Well? I said what I needed to say. Did it feel good? It felt right. We drove off slowly, the beach club shrinking in the rearview mirror, and behind me I left a microphone, a folder of documents, and a woman who finally saw that the person she tried to push out had just walked right back in, and this time, she brought the truth with her. 2 days after the vow renewal, my phone rang. I was standing in my kitchen sorting mail when I saw David's name flash on the screen. I let it ring the first time, then again. I finally picked up on the third call, not because I was ready to hear him out, but because I wanted to see how long he'd take to say what needed to be said. "Mom," he said immediately. No pause, no greeting. What the hell was that? He didn't sound angry. He sounded cornered. "I said what I needed to," I replied flatly. "You knew exactly what was happening. You just didn't think I'd show up. You could have pulled me aside, talked to me privately." "I tried, David," I said. "I've tried for years." He didn't respond to that. Instead, he sighed. "Look, Meredith's a mess. Her parents are furious. You blindsided everyone." "I didn't blindside anyone. I warned you both at the shareholder meeting." He paused. "She says you're trying to destroy her." "I'm not," I said. "But I am going to stop her from stealing something that was never hers to begin with." He got quiet again. Then he said, "You embarrassed her, Mom." I let that sit for a moment. Then I replied, "She called me waitress in front of 40 people, and I said nothing. So no, I'm not sorry she's embarrassed. I'm sorry it took this long for you to notice." That ended the call. He didn't hang up in anger. He just went quiet and dropped the line. The next week was full of silence. No messages, no calls, not even the usual photos of my grandson. But I knew that wouldn't last. People like Meredith don't let go of power. They pretend, they play nice, they regroup. On Thursday, a formal email came through my inbox. The subject line was short: "Clarification regarding Keller Builders Holdings." It was from Meredith's personal email address, but she had copied David and 2 other names I recognized from the Keller Builders Advisory Board. The tone was passive-aggressive, full of vague phrases like miscommunication, good faith, and shared goals. She proposed a private mediation meeting to avoid escalation and requested that I refrain from further public gestures. Public gestures, that's what she called me speaking at her party. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I called Mr. Halpern and read the email to him word for word. "She's scared," he said. "She's trying to negotiate without admitting. She overstepped. She's trying to act like none of it happened," I said. I knew the date because she'd posted about it weeks before. June 10th, save the date, with a picture of the venue and a caption that said, "This time, we do it our way. No compromises." That was Meredith, always turning things into performance pieces. She didn't plan events. She staged them. Every photo, every guest, every color swatch had a purpose, to make her look like someone worth admiring. By then, I had already decided I would go. Invited or not, I didn't need an engraved envelope to justify my presence. This wasn't some distant cousin's barbecue. This was my family, my son, my grandson, and my late husband's name, reputation, and money, all wrapped into a party Meredith had orchestrated like she'd built the family herself. What bothered me most wasn't that she left me off the guest list. It was that she knew I'd see it, and she wanted me to feel excluded. The same way she made sure I didn't know about the school play. The same way she'd turned family dinners into private events for just the nuclear household. She wanted me erased, but I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't say anything to David. We hadn't spoken since the meeting at the Keller Builders office. I wasn't angry, just done waiting to be noticed. I let the silence do the work. Joanna, my neighbor, helped me find something to wear. I didn't want flashy, just something that looked smart, clean, simple. I chose a navy blue suit with a light cream blouse, closed-toed shoes, no makeup other than a touch of lipstick, nothing that looked like I came to compete with Meredith, just enough to show I wasn't a shadow. The night before the ceremony, I reviewed the documents one more time. I had them in a neat black folder in my handbag, not to wave them around, but to be prepared. My lawyer had made it clear: Meredith's company launch, the misuse of company assets, even the name Keller Lifestyle. All of it was built without the proper clearance. I hadn't acted sooner because I was giving them a chance to correct course. But Meredith didn't correct anything. She doubled down. She never thought I'd show up. That's what made it easier. The morning of the ceremony, I drove myself to the venue. It was a private beach club about an hour out of town. Gated, valet only, with decorative lights strung across palm trees and a rental tent that probably cost more than my car. I pulled up behind a catering truck, parked, and walked up the long path toward the reception lawn. No one stopped me. The ceremony had already ended. Guests were mingling near the open bar, waiting for the dinner to start. There were flower arrangements every few feet. White roses and hydrangeas, Meredith's favorites. Classical music played in the background. Someone handed me a glass of water, assuming I was part of the staff again. I didn't correct them. Stood near the back, blending in, and watched. David and Meredith were posing for photos near the ocean. He wore a pale gray suit. She was in a sleeveless satin dress that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. My grandson, now 8, was holding her train and trying not to trip over the sand. Then someone called for toasts. They walked back to the tent. Meredith took the microphone first. "Thank you, everyone, for being here," she said, her voice perfectly projected. "This day means the world to me, to us. And I'm so proud of the family we've built, the memories we've made, and the legacy we're continuing together." I watched her smile, then I stepped forward. I didn't rush. I didn't make a scene. I waited until she handed the microphone to the event coordinator and turned to pose with her friends again. That's when I gently placed my hand on the mic and took it. People turned. Some smiled politely, assuming I was another friend giving a speech. Others narrowed their eyes, clearly trying to figure out who I was. Then Meredith saw me. Her expression froze. Her body went rigid, like she'd just swallowed something sharp. I held the microphone firmly and spoke without raising my voice. "My name is Helen Keller," I said. "Some of you know me. Most of you probably don't. That's all right. I wasn't on the guest list." A few guests looked at each other. Someone chuckled nervously. "I'm David's mother," I continued, "and I'd like to say a few words. Not about the marriage, not about the party, about the people behind it." I saw David in the corner of my eye. He took a step forward but didn't speak. "I'm not here to argue. I found out about it through the school's newsletter, which I still received by email. The cast list had his name. There was a note about grandparents being welcome. I hadn't been invited. I emailed David. I asked if it would be okay if I came. No, response. The night of the play, I sat in my car outside the school gym, parked under a tree in the corner lot. I waited until the lights inside dimmed and the music started. Then I walked up quietly and peeked through the side door window. I saw them, David, Meredith, and her parents. They were in the second row, smiling, clapping, taking pictures. Meredith's mother wore a glittery scarf and a giant brooch. Her father had one of those handheld cameras, like it was a red carpet event. I saw my grandson on stage dressed as a tree. He was waving, grinning, and then I saw him mouth the word grandma into the crowd. He didn't see me. I walked back to the car and sat there for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat still. The silence was louder than anything Meredith ever said to me. The next morning, I opened my laptop. On the family construction company website, there was a new announcement. Coming soon. Meredith. Interiors. A design and lifestyle brand powered by Keller Builders. I blinked. Her name was all over it. The logo had her initials. There was even a video of her walking through one of our old project sites, wearing a hard hat like she'd built the place herself. I called Alan, my husband's old friend, who still worked in real estate consulting. He picked up on the first ring. "I was hoping you'd call," he said. "You saw the site?" "I did. That woman's trying to rebrand your husband's legacy into her personal vanity project. I wouldn't let that slide. Neither would I." 2 days later, I mailed a letter to the Keller Builders business address, officially requesting a meeting of shareholders. Meredith didn't know yet. David didn't either. I made an appointment at the hair salon. I bought a new outfit. Not fancy, not loud, just sharp, clean lines. Comfortable shoes. I was done being overlooked. At the next board meeting, held quietly in the office conference room that still had my husband's old plaques on the wall, I arrived before anyone else. I placed a printed agenda on the table. Discussion of Meredith Interiors brand launch 2, company asset use and oversight 3, shareholder voting structure and legal position. David walked in first. He was surprised to see me. "Mom?" he asked. "Yes. You called this meeting?" "Yes, I did." He looked confused. Then Meredith entered, dressed like she was going on television. She saw me and froze. "Helen," she said, "I wasn't aware you'd be attending. That's because you didn't read the shareholder agreement. I'm not just attending. I called it." Meredith glanced at David. He looked down. I handed each of them a packet. Inside were highlighted sections of the original company documents, as well as recent screenshots from the website showing company resources being used for personal branding without shareholder approval. "This isn't about control," I told them calmly. "It's about respect. You can build whatever you want with your own money, but not with mine, not with my name, and definitely not without my voice in the room." David was quiet. Meredith tried to argue, but I didn't engage. I simply stood, collected my folder, and said, "This is a courtesy. There won't be another one." Then I left. The following week, I received an email from Meredith. "Let's talk. Maybe we can sort this out like family." I didn't answer. Instead, I started planning. I knew the next big event Meredith had on the calendar was her vow renewal. She'd been teasing it for months, posting sketches of the dress, talking about beachfront vows, hinting at surprises for the guests. I made a call to an old friend who now ran a small audio company. I told her I needed a microphone for an event, not to host it, just to speak, briefly. She said she'd take care of it. I said nothing to David. I said nothing to anyone. But when that day came, and that microphone was handed to me, I was going to use it. Not to raise my voice, not to cause a scene, and not to shame anyone. Just to remind everyone of something Meredith had forgotten. I wasn't invisible, and I hadn't come to serve. The invitation to Meredith's vow renewal never came. Not a card, not a text, not even a mention. It was subtle, changing the family dinner night without telling me. "Oh, sorry, Helen. I thought David mentioned it." Then it was the vacations I was never invited to. Just a last-minute trip, nothing personal. Then it was Christmas, dinner being just for the kids this year. Then finally came the day she called me Waitress. That word kept echoing in my head like a drum. The week after her birthday, I received a message from David asking if I could come babysit for an hour while they ran some errands. I didn't answer. I read the message, closed it, and put the phone down. The next day, Meredith posted a photo from her party on social media. The caption read, "Surrounded by the people who truly matter." I wasn't in a single photo. I wasn't tagged. I had brought a gift, helped clean up, and smiled politely all evening, and I was completely erased. I didn't cry. Not yet, but something inside me hardened. That weekend, I went to the attic and pulled out a box labeled Documents. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were old files from my late husband, ownership certificates, bank records, a deed to the lake cabin, and most importantly, the founding papers of our family's small construction company, the one David had helped run during college, the one I still had shares in. I sat at the kitchen table with every document spread out like puzzle pieces, and I started reading. I called an old friend of my husband's, Alan, who worked in real estate. Then I called a lawyer I knew from the library who helped seniors with wills and estate issues. Then I called Joanna. By Monday morning, I had made 3 appointments. I told no one. Meredith thought she had humiliated me in front of her guests. She thought she'd won. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't going to yell, cry, or plead. I was going to wait, and when the next big party came, the one she was already planning for her vow renewal ceremony in July, I was going to take the microphone, and when I did, I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to tell the truth, just loud enough for everyone to hear. After Meredith called me Waitress at her birthday party, something in me changed. The silence that followed wasn't just between me and her, it was inside me too. It stretched out across the hours of my days, heavy and cold. I didn't return David's texts. I didn't go to their house. I didn't offer to babysit. For once in my life, I stopped reaching out first, and, for the first time, no one reached back. The week passed. Then 2. Then 3. I thought maybe David would call. He didn't. Instead, I got a message from Meredith. "Hope everything's okay. If you're upset about something, it might help to talk. Let's not turn small misunderstandings into big drama." I stared at the screen for a long time. A misunderstanding? That's what she called it? Publicly mocking me in front of 40 people, reducing me to a household prop, making me invisible, and now I was the one turning it into drama? I didn't respond. Instead, I called Mr. Halpern, the lawyer from the library. He'd been helping seniors with estate planning for years. When I told him my situation, he didn't interrupt. He didn't act surprised. When I finished, he said simply, "You're not the first mother pushed out of her own family, but if you still have shares in the company your husband built, you have more leverage than you think." I brought in the documents, every folder, every deed, every old letter I could find. He spent a few days reviewing them, then called me back to meet. "I've seen worse setups," he said, adjusting his glasses. "But your husband left you with controlling interest in the original entity. This clause here confirms it. David might run the operations now, but you still hold the authority to call a shareholder vote, especially if you have any reason to believe misuse or redirection of company resources is happening. Like if he let Meredith use the company account for personal expenses, he didn't nod. But he didn't deny it either. I thanked him and left with a new folder in my bag, one that outlined exactly what I could do, legally, if I chose to. I still didn't know how far I wanted to go. I wasn't trying to destroy my son, but I also wasn't going to let them treat me like furniture anymore. The final straw came 2 weeks later. It was my grandson's school play, his first time performing on stage.